The golden Montana sunset blazed across the dusty horizon as Clayton Foster reined his horse to a stop at the crest of the hill, his weathered eyes narrowing at the sight of the makeshift auction platform below. The year was 1875, and the frontier town of Willow Creek had become infamous for its questionable trade practices, today's human auction being the most deplorable of them all. Clayton's jaw tightened beneath his 3-day stubble. He'd heard rumors of 3 sisters being sold off to the highest bidder, orphaned after their parents died of typhoid on the Oregon Trail. He hadn't come looking for trouble, but trouble had found him all the same, and his conscience wouldn't allow him to ride away. "Easy, Thunder," he murmured to his stallion, patting the horse's muscled neck. "We've got work to do." The crowd below grew rowdier as Clayton approached, dismounting and threading his way through the mass of unwashed bodies. The stench of whiskey and desperation hung heavy in the air. At the front of the platform stood a portly auctioneer, his fancy waistcoat straining against his bulging stomach, and behind him Clayton's heart-constricted 3 young women, their wrists bound with rough rope, their faces a mixture of terror and resignation. The eldest couldn't have been more than 22, with fiery red hair and a defiant tilt to her chin despite the fear in her eyes. The middle sister, perhaps 20, kept her gaze fixed on the wooden planks beneath her feet, her blonde hair falling forward to shield her face. The youngest, who looked barely 18, trembled visibly, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged cheeks. "Gentlemen," the auctioneer bellowed, "today we have a rare opportunity. 3 fine young ladies of good breeding, sold as a lot. Think of the possibilities: household help, companionship, whatever your heart desires." His eyebrows waggled suggestively, eliciting crude laughter from the crowd. Clayton's hand drifted to the revolver at his hip. He'd spent the last 10 years trying to outrun his past, trying to become a better man than the reckless youth who'd left Virginia after the war. He'd promised himself he'd never again participate in the buying and selling of human beings, yet here he was, preparing to do just that to save these women from a fate worse than death. "Starting bid is $300 for all 3, the auctioneer called out. "$350, shouted a burly miner, his teeth yellow and rotting. $400, countered a well-dressed gentleman whose eyes held a cruelty that made Clayton's blood run cold. The bidding escalated quickly. Clayton watched as the sisters huddled closer together, the eldest wrapping her arms protectively around her siblings. He knew that whoever won them would likely separate them, and the thought pushed him to action. $1,000, Clayton called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent crowd. The auctioneer's eyes widened. "I believe we have a serious bidder, gentlemen. $1,000 going once." $1,100, growled the well-dressed man, glaring at Clayton. Clayton met his gaze steadily. $1,500. It was nearly every penny he had to his name, the result of years of hard work on cattle drives and at his small ranch outside of town. The crowd murmured in disbelief. Few men in these parts had that kind of cash on hand, and everyone knew it. $1,500 going once. Going twice. The auctioneer paused dramatically, scanning the crowd. "Sold! To the gentleman in the black hat." Relief flooded through Clayton, followed quickly by the sobering reality of what he'd just done. He approached the platform, fishing out the leather pouch containing his life savings. As he handed over the money, the eldest sister caught his eye, her expression a mixture of suspicion and the faintest flicker of hope. The auctioneer counted the bills with greedy fingers before nodding. "They're all yours, mister. Do with them as you please." Clayton climbed the 3 steps to the platform and approached the sisters. Up close, he could see the sprinkling of freckles across the eldest's nose, the quiet beauty of the middle sister, and the innocent fear in the youngest's wide eyes. "My name is Clayton Foster," he said quietly, pulling out his knife. The youngest flinched, but he held up his free hand. "I'm just going to cut these ropes. You have my word, I mean you no harm." "Your word means nothing to us," the eldest said, her voice stronger than he expected. "We've heard promises before." Clayton nodded. "Fair enough. Actions speak louder than words." He cut through the bindings, taking care not to nick their skin. I have a wagon waiting. If you'll come with me, I'll explain everything on the way to my ranch. And if we refuse? The eldest challenged, though they both knew it was an empty threat. They had nowhere to go, no money, and a town full of men who'd be all too happy to claim them. Then I'd escort you wherever you wish to go, Clayton replied honestly. But I don't think you'll find a safer place than my ranch, at least for now. The three sisters exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, the eldest nodded. I'm Rebecca, she said. These are my sisters, Sarah and Elizabeth. It's a pleasure to meet you all, though I wish it were under different circumstances, Clayton said, tipping his hat. My wagon's this way. As they made their way through town, Clayton was acutely aware of the stares following them. He helped the sisters into his wagon, ensuring they were seated comfortably before climbing up himself and taking the reins. Why did you buy us? Rebecca asked bluntly as they left the town behind. Clayton considered his answer carefully. Because no one should be bought or sold, he said finally. And because I couldn't bear to think what might have happened to you otherwise. So you're our savior? Her tone was skeptical, almost mocking. No, madam. I'm just a man trying to do right in a world that often doesn't. Rebecca studied him, her green eyes piercing. And what do you expect in return for this? Kindness? Nothing, Clayton said firmly. Once we reach my ranch, you'll have a safe place to stay while we figure out your next steps. I have connections in town, respectable folks who might be able to help you find proper work, or maybe even family who could take you in. We have no family. Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice soft but clear. Our parents were our only relatives in America. Everyone else is back in England. Clayton nodded, feeling the weight of their isolation. Then we'll find another solution. There are good people in these parts, despite what you've seen today. Good men, you mean? Rebecca asked sharply. Men looking for wives. Clayton flushed slightly. That's not what I meant. Though I won't lie to you, a single woman has limited options in these territories. But marriage should be a choice, not a necessity for survival. Elizabeth, the youngest, finally spoke, her voice trembling. Our father promised us we'd have a beautiful life in Oregon. A farm of our own. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Now we have nothing. You have each other, Clayton said gently. And you have time. That's more than many can claim in this unforgiving land. The remainder of the journey passed in relative silence, the sisters huddled together on the wagon bench, whispering occasionally to one another. Clayton gave them space, understanding their need to process all that had happened. As they crested the final hill, Clayton's ranch came into view, a modest but well-maintained property with a 2-story farmhouse, a barn, and several outbuildings. A small herd of cattle grazed in the distance, and a stream wound through the eastern edge of the property. It's not much, Clayton said, but it's peaceful. The main house has 4 bedrooms. You'll each have your own, and mine is downstairs. You'll have privacy. It's beautiful, Elizabeth whispered, some of the tension leaving her shoulders as she took in the picturesque scene. Even Rebecca seemed impressed, though she tried to hide it. How long have you been here? She asked. 5 years now. Built most of it myself, with some help from neighbors. Neighbors? Sarah perked up. Are they close by? Clayton smiled. Close enough. The Wilsons are about 2 miles east, lovely family with 5 children. The Murphys are to the north, an older couple whose sons have their own homesteads nearby. And then there's Caleb Johnson, my closest friend, who has the ranch adjacent to mine. You'll meet them all soon enough. As they pulled up to the house, a tall, lean man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. His sandy hair was tousled, and he eyed the wagon with curiosity. That's Caleb now, Clayton said. He helps out around here sometimes. Clay! Caleb called, approaching the wagon. Didn't expect you back so. His voice trailed off as he noticed the 3 women. Oh. Hello there. Clayton climbed down and helped each sister from the wagon, noting how Rebecca positioned herself protectively in front of her siblings. Caleb, these are the Miller sisters Rebecca, Sarah, and Elizabeth. Ladies, this is Caleb Johnson, my neighbor and friend. Caleb removed his hat, revealing a handsome face with kind blue eyes. Pleasure to meet you all. He shot Clayton a questioning look. I'll explain later, Clayton said quietly. For now, the ladies need rest and a good meal. Would you mind helping me get their bags? They don't have any bags, Rebecca said, a flush of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Everything we owned was stolen at the last camp. Clayton nodded, unsurprised. Then we'll get you what you need. For now, let me show you to your rooms. The interior of the farmhouse was surprisingly well kept for a bachelor's residence. Simple, sturdy furniture filled the main room, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Bookshelves lined another, filled with volumes that suggested Clayton was more educated than the average rancher. You read? Sarah asked, moving toward the books with unconcealed interest. When time permits, Clayton replied. Feel free to borrow anything that catches your fancy. He led them upstairs to 3 adjacent bedrooms, each small but clean, with a bed, dresser, and window overlooking the ranch. The washroom is at the end of the hall. There's indoor plumbing, something I insisted on when building the place. Dinner will be ready in about an hour, but please make yourselves at home. Left alone in their rooms, the sisters immediately congregated in Rebecca's, speaking in hushed tones. What do you think he really wants? Elizabeth asked nervously. Rebecca shook her head. I don't know yet. But we need to be cautious. Men don't spend that kind of money without expecting something in return. He seems kind, Sarah offered. And his friend too. So did that trader who promised to take us to safety after Mama and Papa died. Rebecca reminded them bitterly. Look how that turned out. Downstairs, Clayton was having a similar conversation with Caleb. You did what? Caleb exclaimed, keeping his voice low. Clay, have you lost your mind? $1,500? Clayton ran a hand through his dark hair. What was I supposed to do? Leave them to the likes of Harlan Shaw? You know what kind of man he is. Caleb sighed. I know. Your heart's in the right place, as always. But 3 young women under your roof? People will talk. Let them. I didn't bring them here for that. Then what's your plan? Clayton busied himself with preparations for dinner. I thought. Well, there are good men around here looking for wives. Men who would treat them with respect, provide for them. Caleb raised an eyebrow. So you're playing matchmaker now? It's their choice. Clayton insisted. I'm just providing options. Better options than being sold to the highest bidder in Willow Creek. And what about you? Caleb asked carefully. You've been alone since Emily died. 5 years is a long time to grieve, Clay. Clayton's jaw tightened. This isn't about me. Isn't it? I saw the way you looked at the redhead. Rebecca. Clayton corrected automatically, then regretted it when he saw Caleb's knowing smile. It's not like that. I'm just trying to help. Whatever you say, friend. Whatever you say. The following weeks established a tentative routine at the Foster Ranch. Clayton was true to his word, treating the sisters with nothing but respect and giving them space to adjust to their new circumstances. He purchased fabric and necessities from town, enabling them to sew new clothing, and encouraged them to make the house their own. Slowly, the sisters began to relax their guard. Sarah spent hours in the small library, devouring books on everything from history to agriculture. Elizabeth, who had a natural affinity with animals, took to helping with the chickens and even the gentler horses. Rebecca, ever practical, took charge of the household, cooking and cleaning with an efficiency that impressed even Clayton. It was Rebecca who remained the most cautious, watching Clayton with wary eyes, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But as days turned into weeks, even she began to wonder if perhaps they had finally found someone trustworthy. One evening, as Rebecca was preparing dinner, Clayton entered the kitchen, his hat in his hands. "Rebecca, I was wondering if I might have a word with you." She tensed, her hand tightening around the wooden spoon she was using to stir the stew. "Of course. I've invited some folks for dinner tomorrow. The Wilsons, the Murphys, and a few others." Rebecca's brow furrowed. "All right. I'll make sure there's enough food." "That's not all," Clayton continued, looking uncomfortable. "Among the guests will be Richard Wilson, the Wilsons' oldest son. He's 26, owns his own parcel of land adjoining his parents'. He's a good man, hard-working, honest." Understanding dawned on Rebecca's face. "And you think I should marry him?" "I think you should meet him," Clayton corrected. "Get to know him. He's looking for a wife, yes, but he's not desperate or unkind. He would treat you well." Rebecca set down the spoon, turning to face Clayton fully. "So this is why you bought us? To marry us off?" "No," Clayton said firmly. "I bought you to save you from men who would have hurt you. What happens next is entirely your choice. I'm simply introducing you to men of good character who might offer you a future if that's what you want." "And what about my sisters?" "I thought it best to start with you, as the eldest. There are other suitable men for Sarah and Elizabeth, when the time is right." Rebecca studied him, trying to discern his true intentions. "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" Clayton hesitated. "The satisfaction of helping 3 young women find security and happiness." "Nothing else?" Rebecca pressed. "What else would there be?" Clayton asked, genuinely confused. Rebecca stepped closer to him, her green eyes searching his face. "In my experience, Mr. Foster, men always want something." "Not all men," Clayton said quietly. "And it's Clay. Just Clay." For a moment, they stood in silence, the air between them charged with something neither was ready to acknowledge. Then Rebecca turned back to her stew. "I'll meet your Mr. Wilson. But I make no promises beyond that." "That's all I ask," Clayton said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank you, Rebecca." The dinner party the next evening was a carefully orchestrated affair. Clayton had clearly put thought into which of his neighbors to invite, ensuring a balanced mixture of families and single men who might be potential matches for the sisters. Richard Wilson was indeed everything Clayton had described: tall, sturdy, with an open, honest face and a quiet confidence. He was clearly taken with Rebecca from the moment they were introduced, his eyes following her throughout the evening. To Rebecca's surprise, she found him pleasant company. He spoke intelligently about his farm, asked thoughtful questions about her interests, and showed genuine concern when she briefly touched on her family's tragic journey west. "It must have been terrible for you and your sisters," he said, his voice gentle. "Losing your parents, then facing such uncertainty." "It was," Rebecca admitted. "But we survived. More than survived, I'd say. You've adapted admirably. Clay speaks highly of how you've taken charge of the household." Rebecca glanced across the room to where Clayton was deep in conversation with Mrs. Murphy. "Does he?" Richard nodded. "He said you're the most capable woman he's ever met. High praise from a man like Clay Foster." Rebecca felt a curious warmth at the compliment. "You've known him long?" "Since he came to these parts. He helped my father when our barn burned down 3 summers ago. Didn't even know us then, just showed up with lumber and tools and worked alongside us for 2 weeks. Richard smiled. "That's the kind of man he is." Throughout the evening, Rebecca observed similar dynamics with her sisters. Robert Murphy, the eldest son of the Murphy family, seemed enchanted by Sarah's quiet intelligence, while Elizabeth had attracted the attention of Thomas Walker, a young schoolteacher new to the area. As the guests departed, Clayton hung back, helping the sisters clear the table. "Well?" he asked casually. "What did you think of our neighbors?" "They seem nice enough," Sarah said, a small smile playing at her lips. Elizabeth nodded enthusiastically. "Mr. Walker invited me to visit the schoolhouse. He said I could help with the younger children if I wanted." Clayton looked pleased. "Thomas is a good man," Educated back east, came west for adventure, and found his calling teaching. The children adore him. Rebecca remained quiet, methodically stacking plates. And Richard? Clayton prompted gently. What did you make of him? He's not what I expected, Rebecca admitted. He was respectful. Interesting, even. He asked if he might call on you next Sunday, Clayton said. I told him I'd have to check with you first. Rebecca paused in her work. And if I say no? Then he won't call, Clayton said simply. It's your decision, Rebecca. Always. She studied him, still searching for ulterior motives but finding none. He may call, she said finally. But only if Sarah and Elizabeth are present as well. Clayton nodded. I'll let him know. In the weeks that followed, a pattern emerged. Richard Wilson called on Rebecca every Sunday, bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, flowers from his garden, once even a kitten that had been orphaned on his farm. Each visit revealed more of his character, his patience, his quiet humor, his genuine interest in Rebecca's thoughts and feelings. Similarly, Robert Murphy found reasons to visit the Foster ranch, ostensibly to discuss cattle breeding with Clayton but inevitably seeking out Sarah's company. Thomas Walker became a regular visitor as well, bringing Elizabeth books for children and discussing teaching methods with her. Clayton observed these developing relationships with satisfaction, though Rebecca sometimes caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. He kept his distance, never interfering, always ensuring the sisters had privacy during these visits while remaining close enough to provide propriety. One evening, as Rebecca sat on the porch watching the sunset, Clayton joined her, offering a cup of tea. Richard seems to be quite taken with you, he observed. Rebecca accepted the tea, avoiding Clayton's gaze. He's asked me to marry him. Clayton's hand froze halfway to his mouth. I see. And? Have you given him an answer? Not yet. Rebecca took a sip of her tea. He's a good man, just as you said. He would provide well, treat me with respect. But? Clayton prompted, hearing the hesitation in her voice. Rebecca sighed. But I don't love him. I like him, certainly. Perhaps in time, I could grow to love him. Love isn't always the foundation of a successful marriage, Clayton said carefully. Respect, companionship, shared goals, these matter too. Is that what you had with your wife? Rebecca asked suddenly, surprising both of them. Clayton rarely spoke of his late wife, though the sisters knew of her existence from comments Caleb had made. Clayton was quiet for so long that Rebecca thought he might not answer. No, he said finally. Emily and I married for love. Wild, impulsive, all-consuming love. A sad smile touched his lips. We were young, just 18, childhood sweethearts who couldn't imagine life apart. What happened to her? Rebecca asked softly. Childbed fever, Clayton said, his voice hollow. Our son lived only a few hours after she passed. Rebecca's hand moved instinctively to cover his. I'm sorry. Clayton looked down at their joined hands, then gently withdrew his. It was a long time ago. But to answer your question, yes, we had love. And yes, it mattered. But love alone isn't enough. You need trust, respect, the ability to build a life together. And you think Richard and I could have that? Clayton met her eyes. I think you could. But only you can decide if that's what you want. Rebecca looked out over the rolling landscape, golden in the setting sun. When I was a little girl in London, my mother used to read me fairy tales. I'd always dreamed of a love like that, passionate, undeniable, written in the stars. And now? Now I wonder if such love exists outside of stories. She turned to him, her expression serious. What would you do if you were me? Clayton hesitated. I can't answer that, Rebecca. What I can tell you is that Richard Wilson would never hurt you, would always provide for you, would be a good father to your children. He's offered you security, respect, and companionship. But not passion, Rebecca said quietly. Clayton stood abruptly. Some would say passion fades. that practical considerations matter more in the long run. Is that what you believe? He didn't answer directly. Consider his offer carefully. There are worse fates than marrying a kind, stable man who admires you. As he walked away, Rebecca wondered at the sudden tension between them. She had grown comfortable in Clayton's home, perhaps too comfortable. Sometimes she caught herself watching him as he worked, admiring the strength in his shoulders, the gentleness in his hands. It was foolish, she knew. Clayton saw himself as their protector, nothing more. Meanwhile, Sarah had formed a genuine attachment to Robert Murphy. Unlike Rebecca's relationship with Richard, Sarah and Robert shared a natural affinity, spending hours discussing books and ideas. Robert, though not as financially established as Richard, had dreams of expanding his cattle operation and building a home of his own. Elizabeth, the youngest at 18, had blossomed under Thomas Walker's attentions. The young schoolteacher brought out her natural nurturing instincts, and she had begun assisting him at the schoolhouse 3 days a week. His proposal, when it came, surprised no one. "He wants to marry me after the school term ends," Elizabeth confided to her sisters, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "He says we could live in the teacher's cottage, and I could be his assistant." "Are you certain, Lizzie?" Rebecca asked, concerned about her youngest sister's heart. "You're still so young." "I'm the same age Mama was when she married Papa," Elizabeth pointed out. "And I love Thomas. He makes me laugh, and he's so clever, and he loves children as much as I do." Sarah smiled. "I think it's wonderful, Lizzie. You and Thomas are perfectly suited." Rebecca hugged her sister. "If you're sure, then I'm happy for you. Truly." Later that night, Rebecca found Clayton in the barn, brushing down his horse after a late ride. "Elizabeth is going to accept Thomas Walker's proposal," she told him. Clayton nodded, continuing his methodical brushing. "He came to me last week, asked for my blessing since your father isn't here to give it. He's a good match for her. They share the same values, the same dreams." "And Sarah? Did Robert speak to you as well?" "He did. Though he wanted to be sure of Sarah's feelings first. He's building them a house on his portion of the Murphy property. Nothing fancy, but solid. Room to grow." Rebecca leaned against the stall door. "You've done well, playing matchmaker. 2 sisters settled, just as you planned." Clayton set down the brush, turning to face her. "It wasn't a plan, Rebecca. It was a hope that they might find happiness, security." "And me? What did you hope for me?" The air between them seemed to thicken. "The same," he said finally. "Happiness. Security. A good man who would value you as you deserve." "Richard has asked me again," Rebecca said. "He wants an answer by Sunday." Clayton's expression remained carefully neutral. "And what will you tell him?" Rebecca studied him, wishing she could read his thoughts. "What would you have me tell him? It's not my decision to make." "But you have an opinion," Rebecca pressed. "You have an opinion on everything, Clay Foster." A muscle ticked in Clayton's jaw. "My opinion doesn't matter. This is your life, your choice." "It matters to me," Rebecca said softly. Clayton turned away, busying himself with storing the grooming tools. "Richard Wilson can give you everything you need. A good home, financial stability, respect in the community. Children, if you want them." "That's not what I asked." Clayton's shoulders tensed. "What do you want me to say, Rebecca? That I think you should refuse him? That I—" He cut himself off, shaking his head. "That you what?" When he turned to face her again, his expression was carefully composed. "That I think you should consider your future carefully. Don't rush into anything you might regret." Rebecca stepped closer to him. "Is that really all you have to say to me?" Clayton's eyes darkened. "What else would you have me say?" "The truth," Rebecca whispered. "Just once, I'd like to hear the truth." For a moment, something raw and vulnerable flashed across Clayton's face. Then he stepped back. "The truth is, I want what's best for you. And that's Richard Wilson." Rebecca felt as though he had slapped her. I see. She straightened her shoulders. Thank you for making it clear. I'll give Richard my answer on Sunday. She turned and walked from the barn, her back rigid, refusing to let him see how his words had affected her. Clayton watched her go, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, fighting the urge to call her back. Sunday dawned clear and bright, a perfect early summer day. Richard arrived promptly after church, looking handsome in his Sunday best, a small bouquet of wild flowers in his hand. He found Rebecca waiting on the porch swing, wearing her finest dress, her red hair swept up elegantly. You look beautiful, he said sincerely, presenting the flowers. Thank you, Rebecca replied, accepting them with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Shall we walk? It's such a lovely day. They strolled down to the creek that marked the boundary of Clayton's property, making small talk about the weather, the church service, the progress of Richard's crops. Finally, he stopped beneath a large oak tree, taking both her hands in his. Rebecca, I hope you've had time to consider my proposal. I want you to know that I would do everything in my power to make you happy as my wife. You would want for nothing. Rebecca looked into his earnest face. Richard Wilson was everything a woman should want in a husband: kind, stable, hard-working. She would be comfortable with him, respected, secure. Perhaps in time, she might even grow to love him. Richard, she began carefully, I am honored by your proposal. Truly. You are a good man, and any woman would be fortunate to be your wife. His face lit up with hope, but something in her tone made him pause. But, Rebecca took a deep breath. But I cannot accept. It wouldn't be fair to you, to marry you when I cannot give you all that you deserve. Richard's expression fell, but he didn't seem entirely surprised. It's Foster, isn't it? Rebecca's eyes widened. What? I've seen the way you look at him when you think no one is watching. And the way he looks at you. Richard squeezed her hands gently. I had hoped. But I understand. No, you don't understand, Rebecca said, flustered. Clay doesn't. He has made it very clear that he thinks I should marry you. Richard smiled sadly. What a man says and what a man feels aren't always the same thing. Clay Foster is a proud man, Rebecca. And an honorable one. He would never allow himself to court a woman he perceives as being under his protection. Rebecca shook her head. You're mistaken. He sees me as a responsibility, nothing more. Am I mistaken? Richard challenged gently. Then why can't you accept my proposal? If there's nothing between you and Foster, what's holding you back? Rebecca had no answer for that. Richard nodded, as if her silence confirmed his suspicions. I hope you find happiness, Rebecca Miller. You deserve it. He leaned forward and kissed her cheek. And if things don't work out with Foster, well, my offer stands. For a while at least. Rebecca watched him walk away, conflicting emotions churning within her. Was Richard right? Did Clayton feel something for her beyond duty? And even if he did, would he ever act on it? When she returned to the house, she found Clayton in the kitchen, pretending to read a newspaper but clearly waiting for her return. How did it go? He asked, trying to sound casual. I refused him, Rebecca said simply. Clayton's newspaper crinkled as his grip tightened. May I ask why? Rebecca crossed to the stove, busying herself with the kettle. You may not. A tense silence filled the kitchen. Finally, Clayton folded his newspaper. Rebecca, if this is about your sisters, it's not about my sisters, she interrupted. It's about me. About what I want. And what is it you want? Rebecca turned to face him. Something real. Something true. Not just security or comfort or respectability. I want. She hesitated, then lifted her chin. I want love, Clay. The kind that makes your heart race when they walk into a room. The kind that makes you a better person just for having known them. Clayton's expression was unreadable. And you don't think you could have that with Richard? I know I couldn't, Rebecca said quietly. Because I already feel those things for someone else. The air between them seemed to vibrate with tension. Clayton stood slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Rebecca, the front door burst open, and Sarah rushed in, her face aglow with excitement. Rebecca! Clay! Robert has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes. The moment shattered. Clayton stepped back, his expression closing off. That's wonderful news, Sarah. Congratulations. Rebecca forced a smile for her sister. I'm so happy for you, Sarah. Truly. As Sarah chattered about wedding plans and Robert's house, Rebecca watched Clayton retreat, physically and emotionally. Whatever had almost happened between them was gone, the moment lost. The following weeks were a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Elizabeth and Thomas had set their date for August, while Sarah and Robert planned a September wedding. Both couples were radiant with happiness, their future paths clear before them. Rebecca threw herself into helping her sisters, keeping busy to avoid dwelling on her own uncertain future. Clayton, meanwhile, seemed to be finding more and more reasons to be away from the ranch, leaving early and returning late, avoiding being alone with Rebecca whenever possible. It was Caleb who finally confronted him, cornering him in the barn one evening in late July. You're being a fool, Clay. Clayton continued saddling his horse. Don't know what you're talking about. Like hell you don't. Caleb leaned against the stall door, blocking Clayton's exit. The whole county can see you're in love with Rebecca Miller, except maybe Rebecca herself. She's under my protection, Clayton said stiffly. It wouldn't be right. Protection? Caleb scoffed. She's not some fragile flower, Clay. She's a grown woman who knows her own mind. And unless I'm completely mistaken, she feels the same way about you. Clayton's hands stilled on the saddle. She refused Richard Wilson. Of course she did. She's waiting for you to stop being such a damned gentleman and tell her how you feel. And what if she doesn't feel the same? What if she just refused Richard because she wasn't ready? I'd be putting her in an impossible position, living under my roof. Caleb rolled his eyes. For a smart man, you can be remarkably dense. The woman lights up like a Christmas tree whenever you walk into a room. She's turned down the best catch in 3 counties. What more evidence do you need? Clayton sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's not that simple, Caleb. Sure it is. You love her. Tell her. Let her decide what she wants. And if she doesn't want me? Then at least you'll know, Caleb said simply. Better than spending the rest of your life wondering what might have been. After Caleb left, Clayton sat on a hay bale, turning his friend's words over in his mind. Was it possible? Could Rebecca feel for him what he felt for her? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. He had fallen in love with her gradually, almost without realizing it. Her strength, her fierce protection of her sisters, her quick mind and quicker wit, all of it had worked its way into his heart until he could no longer imagine his life without her in it. But he had fought those feelings, convinced that acting on them would be taking advantage of her vulnerable position. Now, with Elizabeth and Sarah's weddings approaching, Rebecca would soon be free to make her own choices, go her own way. The thought of her leaving made his chest ache. Clayton stood, decision made. He would speak to her tonight, lay his heart bare. Whatever came after, at least he would know he had been honest. But when he returned to the house, Rebecca was nowhere to be found. Sarah informed him that she had gone into town with Elizabeth to make final arrangements for the wedding dress. They'll be staying overnight at Mrs. Wilson's, Sarah added. The dressmaker is coming early tomorrow for the final fitting. Clayton nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. I see. Well, please tell Rebecca I'd like to speak with her when she returns. The next morning, Clayton rode into town, unable to wait another day. He found Rebecca at the dressmaker's shop, watching as Elizabeth twirled in her wedding gown, a simple but elegant creation of white muslin with lace trim. Clay! Elizabeth exclaimed, spotting him through the window. What do you think? Isn't it beautiful? Clayton entered the shop, his eyes immediately finding Rebecca. She wore a simple blue dress that brought out the green in her eyes, her red hair tumbling loose around her shoulders. His heart stuttered in his chest. "You look like an angel, Elizabeth," he said sincerely, then turned to Rebecca. "Might I have a word with you? In private?" Rebecca's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "Of course. Elizabeth, I'll be right back." They stepped outside onto the boardwalk, finding a quiet spot away from the bustling main street. "What is it?" Rebecca asked, a note of concern in her voice. "Is everything all right at the ranch?" "Everything's fine," Clayton assured her. I needed to see you. To talk to you." Rebecca waited, her expression guarded but hopeful. Clayton took a deep breath. "Rebecca, I've been a coward. For months now, I've been fighting what I feel for you, telling myself it wouldn't be right, that I'd be taking advantage." Her breath caught. "What? What do you feel for me?" "Everything," Clayton said simply. "I love you, Rebecca. I love your strength, your fierce heart, your loyalty to your sisters. I love the way you challenge me, the way you see through my nonsense. I love the person I am when I'm with you." Tears welled in Rebecca's eyes. "Why didn't you say something? All this time, pushing me toward Richard." "Because I wanted you to have choices," Clayton said. "Real choices, not just me because I was the one who happened to buy you at that godforsaken auction. I wanted you to know what else was out there, who else was out there. And now?" Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now I'm asking you to choose me." Clayton took her hands in his. "Not because I saved you, or because you feel you owe me, but because you want to. Because maybe, just maybe, you might feel for me a fraction of what I feel for you." A slow smile spread across Rebecca's face. "Clay Foster, for a supposedly intelligent man, you can be remarkably obtuse." Before he could respond, she raised herself on tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Clayton's arms came around her, pulling her close against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Rebecca rested her forehead against his chest. "I've been in love with you for months, you impossible man. Why do you think I refused Richard?" Clayton's heart soared. "You might have said something," he murmured into her hair. "I tried. That day by the creek, when I told you I felt those things for someone else. Who did you think I was talking about?" Clayton laughed, the sound rich with joy and relief. "I thought. I don't know what I thought. I was too afraid to hope." Rebecca pulled back to look at him. "No more fear. No more doubts. I love you, Clayton Foster. I choose you, freely and completely." Clayton cupped her face in his hands, his eyes shining with emotion. "Rebecca Miller, will you marry me? Make a life with me on that ranch? Have children with me, grow old with me?" "Yes," Rebecca whispered, tears of happiness spilling down her cheeks. "Yes to all of it." Their second kiss was witnessed by Elizabeth, who had come looking for her sister and now stood in the doorway of the dressmaker's shop, clapping her hands in delight. "Sarah owes me $5, she exclaimed. "I told her you two would figure it out before my wedding." Clayton and Rebecca broke apart, laughing. "You were betting on us?" Rebecca asked, pretending to be scandalized. "Everyone was," Elizabeth said cheerfully. "Even Mrs. Wilson had money in the pot. Though she thought it would take until Christmas." Clayton shook his head, keeping his arm firmly around Rebecca's waist. "Am I the only one who didn't know how I felt?" "Pretty much," Elizabeth confirmed. "It was obvious to anyone with eyes. The way you looked at her when you thought no one was watching." She sighed romantically. "Just like in a novel." Rebecca blushed, but she leaned into Clayton's embrace. "Well, I hope the novel has a happy ending." "The happiest," Clayton promised, pressing a kiss to her temple. The last week of August saw Elizabeth and Thomas Walker wed in a simple but joyful ceremony at the small church in town. The bride was radiant in her white dress, the groom handsome and proud as he took her hand in marriage. At the celebration afterward, Held at Clayton's ranch, Rebecca watched her youngest sister dance with her new husband, their faces alight with happiness. Sarah and Robert joined them, equally besotted with each other. "You did this," Rebecca said to Clayton, who stood beside her, his arm around her waist. "You gave them this chance at happiness." Clayton shook his head. "They did it themselves. I just provided the opportunity." "You provided much more than that," Rebecca insisted. "Safety. Respect. The chance to choose their own paths." Clayton turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "And what about you? Are you happy with your choice?" Rebecca's smile was radiant. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible." September brought Sarah and Robert's wedding, another joyous occasion that filled the Murphy homestead with laughter and music. With both her sisters now settled in homes of their own, Rebecca moved her few possessions into Clayton's bedroom, no longer concerned with propriety now that their engagement was official. Their own wedding was planned for October, when the aspens would be golden and the air crisp with autumn. It would be a small affair, with just their closest friends and Rebecca's sisters and their new husbands. The night before their wedding, Clayton found Rebecca on the porch, gazing up at the stars. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and sat beside her on the swing. "Having second thoughts?" he teased gently. Rebecca leaned against him. "Never. I was just thinking about how much has changed in 6 months. When you found us at that auction, I thought my life was over. I couldn't imagine a future that wasn't terrible." Clayton's arm tightened around her. "And now? Now I can't imagine a future that isn't wonderful." She turned to face him. "You saved us, Clay. Not just from that auction, but from despair. You gave us hope again." "You saved me too," Clayton said quietly. "After Emily died, I was just existing, not living. You brought life back into this house, into my heart." Rebecca reached up to touch his face. "Tomorrow I become your wife. And I the happiest man in Montana Territory," Clayton replied, catching her hand and kissing her palm. Their wedding day dawned clear and bright, the October sun gilding the landscape in gold and amber. Rebecca wore a gown of cream-colored silk, ordered specially from Denver, with Sarah and Elizabeth as her attendants. Clayton stood tall and proud at the altar, Caleb at his side as best man. When Rebecca walked down the aisle on Richard Wilson's arm, he had graciously offered to give her away. Having found happiness himself with a young widow from the next county, Clayton felt his heart might burst with joy. She was radiant, her green eyes shining with love, her red hair crowned with wildflowers. The ceremony was simple but deeply moving. When they exchanged vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other for all their days, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Clayton drew Rebecca into his arms, kissing her with all the love in his heart. The small congregation erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with dancing and feasting and much toasting of the happy couple. As the evening wore on, Clayton found Rebecca sitting with her sisters, the three of them with their heads close together, laughing about something. "May I steal my wife away?" he asked, offering Rebecca his hand. Sarah and Elizabeth exchanged knowing smiles. "Of course," Sarah said. "We were just reminiscing about our first days here. How frightened we were, how uncertain. And look at us now," Elizabeth added happily. "All married to wonderful men, with bright futures ahead." Rebecca stood, taking Clayton's hand. "All because one good man couldn't ride past an injustice." Clayton led her to the edge of the gathering, where they could look out over the ranch, their home, bathed in moonlight. "Happy, Mrs. Foster?" "Completely, Mr. Foster." Rebecca's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Though I do believe it's time we retired. Don't you think?" Clayton's breath caught at the promise in her voice. "I believe you're right, wife." They slipped away from the celebration, making their way to the house that was now truly their home. As they reached the porch, Clayton swept Rebecca into his arms, carrying her across the threshold to the sound of her delighted laughter. Later, as they lay entwined in each other's arms, Rebecca traced the line of Clayton's jaw with her fingertip. "Do you know what today is, besides our wedding day?" Clayton caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "What's that?" "It's exactly 6 months since the day you bought 3 sisters at an auction," Rebecca said softly. 6 months since you changed our lives forever?" Clayton pulled her closer. "Best purchase I ever made." Rebecca laughed, the sound full of joy and promise. "I love you, Clayton Foster. And I love you, Rebecca Foster. Now and always." As they drifted to sleep in each other's arms, both knew that while their story had begun in the most unlikely of circumstances, it would continue for a lifetime of love, respect, and happiness, not just for them, but for Sarah and Elizabeth as well. 3 sisters, once facing a future of despair, now embarking on lives filled with love, security, and joy, all because one honorable cowboy couldn't stand by and watch an injustice unfold. 5 years later, the Foster Ranch had prospered and grown. Clayton and Rebecca had welcomed twin boys, James and William, now 3 years old and full of mischief. Sarah and Robert had a daughter and a son, while Elizabeth and Thomas had 3 children of their own, with a 4th on the way. On a warm summer evening, the extended family gathered at the Foster Ranch for their annual reunion. Children played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the breeze. The men discussed cattle prices and crops, while the women prepared a feast to be served outdoors under the ancient oak tree. As the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across the land, Clayton found Rebecca by the creek, watching their sons splash in the shallow water under Sarah's watchful eye. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Rebecca leaned back against his chest. "I was thinking about how full my heart is. How perfect this life is, despite all its challenges." Clayton kissed the top of her head. "I have something to show you." He led her to the barn, where a covered object stood in one corner. With a flourish, he pulled away the canvas to reveal a beautifully crafted cradle. "Clay," Rebecca breathed, her hand going to her still flat stomach. "How did you know?" Clayton grinned. "A husband notices things. Like when his wife starts getting queasy at the smell of coffee. And when she falls asleep before the boys 3 nights in a row." Rebecca turned in his arms, her eyes shining. "I was going to tell you tonight. I wanted to be sure." "Are you happy about it?" Clayton asked, his expression softening. "Overjoyed," Rebecca assured him. "Though a bit daunted at the thought of 3 children under 4. "We'll manage," Clayton said confidently. "We have each other. And your sisters. And this whole community we've built." Rebecca traced the intricate carving on the cradle's headboard, 3 intertwined roses. "What's this?" "3 sisters," Clayton explained. "Forever connected, no matter where life takes them." Tears welled in Rebecca's eyes. "It's beautiful. Perfect." As they walked back to join the family gathering, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the depths of despair at that auction block to this abundant life filled with love and purpose, it was more than she had ever dared to dream. Under the spreading branches of the oak tree, surrounded by family and friends, Clayton raised his glass. "To family," he toasted. "Both the one we're born with and the one we choose." "To love," Rebecca added, her eyes meeting his across the table. "The kind that transforms and endures." "To second chances," Sarah chimed in, squeezing Robert's hand. "And to one stubborn cowboy," Elizabeth concluded with a grin, "who couldn't ride past an injustice and ended up changing all our lives." As glasses clinked and cheers went up, Clayton's eyes held Rebecca's, a lifetime of love and commitment reflected in their depths. From the most unlikely of beginnings had grown the most beautiful of stories, a testament to courage, hope, and the transformative power of love.